Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My name is Chris Moreau. I'm the Mid-Hudson Region Vice President for NYSCOPBA. With me here today is County Executive Mark Molinaro, Senator Sue Serino, Assemblyman Kieran Lawler, NYSCOPBA President Mike Powers, NYSCOPBA Recording Secretary Chris Summers, NYSCOPBA Executive Vice President Kevin Donnelly, and NYSCOPBA Treasurer Frank Gilbo. We're here today because last week the state announced the closure of 6 correctional facilities from the west to the north to right here in the Mid-Hudson. This announcement was made without any input from the people that it will directly affect. And in typical Department of Corrections fashion, we were given no heads up whatsoever. The notice was given to the by the state to our organization to attend the meeting. 10 minutes later, a memo was out to the public. This is starting to become a yearly slap in the face to our membership. And to top all this off, the 90-day notification used to skirt the laws on the books requiring a year's notification to close these facilities, our membership was once again caught on their heels. I'd like to bring up President Powers to say a few words.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for coming here today. I just want to expand on something real quick. Here we are on the cusp of the holidays, and 2 years in a row, we're looking at facility closures that have a direct impact on our membership and the employees that work for the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. As Chris mentioned, this is a bit of a slap in the face to us as this alters many lives. Morales and many lives of our members that have to uproot their families and potentially move to other areas of the state in order to maintain their job. Currently in the state of New York, in this agency, the morale is not very good at all. We're dealing with a lot of violence in our facilities. We're dealing with a lot of contraband in our facilities, and with that comes pretty poor morale. Our membership, which we're hearing daily as a board, are starting to lose faith in the agency. We're looking at a potentially $142 million savings this budget calls for. What about all the other years? What of all the millions of dollars that have been saved through these potential closures and no reinvestment in the work that our members do on a continual basis? That reinvestment needs to be real. It needs to be forthcoming towards the rank and file for our department, and at this time we're not seeing any of it. Those savings need to come back in a reinvestment towards our staff for many of the programs that we've called for, the secure vendor package program, and a violence study over the assaults on staff in our correctional facilities and the amount of contraband coming in.
I'd like to bring up County Executive Mark Molinaro to say a few words.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to the men and women that provide for security at all of these facilities. I want to offer a couple comments on a couple different aspects of this announced closure. First, as a member of the state legislature some years ago, lived through this very experience with then Governor Spitzer and the abrupt announcement of closure of several facilities. As a member of the state legislature, we worked very hard, in fact, to require the state of New York to meet certain announcement requirements and redevelopment planning. None of that has been adhered to in this case. And Dutchess County broadly has been the victim of the state of New York's investment in development. And I say that I use victimization as appropriately when New York City and the state of New York didn't want those with mental health concerns, those with disabilities, and those who commit crimes in their communities. They built facilities in the suburbs. They built correctional facilities, psych centers, and other structures to contain individuals that they didn't want to care for. And then over the course of the last 30 years, the state of New York has abandoned those facilities. And with it, by the way, not only the structures laying dormant, becoming these massive pieces of property that don't ever get redeveloped, but with it went the services. And counties like ours, Nassau and Suffolk, all continue to live with growing needs for mental health services and community safety. The state's failure to work with local leaders, state legislators, and the people most affected, the employees, to develop both a plan for announcement, plan for closure, and a plan for redevelopment is continued victimization, and it's irresponsible. Secondly, the Downstate Correctional Facility was built for a purpose, 1979. It's actually one of the younger, if you will, facilities, and in a strange way, among the more modern. It's right now, there's significant construction underway, implementing security systems, enhancing and improving the facility. As I understand it, the state of New York's under contract right now that it will not be able to abandon, and therefore tax dollars will have been wasted. But this particular facility was built for a reason. It's a regional center that allows for thousands. In fact, administrative staff suggest as many as 26,000 individuals will pass through that door in a given year. Why? Because they're brought in, they're evaluated, in some cases provided critical mental health and substance use disorder treatment, and then transferred to someplace else, some other facility, hours upon hours away. As someone responsible for a correctional facility, I can tell you right now, telling an individual who might be dealing with substance use disorder or with severe mental health concerns, putting them on a bus and transporting them 3 and 4 hours away without that kind of interaction with professional staff only threatens their safety and the safety of the people who work with them. That facility is there for a reason. It helps to move people both into the state's correctional system and back out into the community. Thirdly, and I think as importantly, this announcement, and ultimately if the state is allowed to move forward with its closure, displaces 600 families and, by the way, those inmates within that facility. Those who rely on this place for employment will have to, with little notice at the worst time of year, dealing with a pandemic and heightened cost of living, will have to make the choice to move someplace else. Now, to some people, that might seem like a minor inconvenience. But to individuals whose entire livelihoods, whose children go to our schools, whose businesses may rely on them, to uproot them for no reason at all, and I'll get to that last, for no reason at all, is at best cruel to them. Those inmates also are within proximity to services that they receive from outside of the world. Legal defense, family connection, religious and faith connections. Those get uprooted and moved someplace else. That is an abandonment of the very basic concept that within a correctional facility, our hope is to help people correct behavior. All of that, by the way, again, cruel and unnecessary. The last point I'll make, I have been in public office for a very long time. The state of New York has often announced projected savings when they close these facilities. The state of New York never realizes the savings. Why? Because it is among the most inefficient, ineffective governments in the country. So what we have today is the state announcing that it will save billions or hundreds of millions, in this case, dollars. It will not realize those dollars. It will not achieve those savings. And to the points already made, any dollar saved will not go to the last point I'll make, the place it needs to go. We are living currently with an increase in criminal behavior. In every corner of the state legislature and the Democrat majority in both houses, along with the governor, have endorsed policies that have produced a deterioration of public safety, sought to undermine the work of law enforcement, and resulted in the re-victimization of victims and witnesses. We see it every day in our communities. And at this very moment, we have an incoming mayor of the city of New York who says that policy isn't so smart. So here we have a situation where you have increased criminal behavior, increased crime, reduced public safety, and the state of New York thinks closing correctional facilities is a smart idea. It is not. And I said that was the last, but I'll say this. We're also being told that there's only 600 plus people in this facility. That is a convenient number. We have lived through the last 20 months of courts not functioning, officers and law enforcement being undermined, arrests down, courts not processing cases, and what that has meant to facilities like Downstate and ones that I operate, the one I operate, is a precipitous reduction and likely temporary reduction in inmate population. And every time the state has closed a correctional facility, I can tell you what has occurred. When they close a state facility, they force more inmates to county facilities, requiring us to maintain their care, requiring us to shoulder their costs, and threatening the safety and security of the people in those facilities. It happens every time. This governor promised transparency and collaboration. The Department of Corrections is compelled by law to meet certain requirements. None of that has occurred in this case, and we ask the state of New York not only to reconsider, but to absolutely change this course of action. It is dangerous. It is not efficient. It will not result in the savings, and ultimately will leave yet one more gaping hole in this community. Thanks very much.
I'd like to bring up Senator Susurino.
Thank you so much for everybody joining here today. You know, since the start of the COVID pandemic, hundreds of our neighbors who work at Downstate Correctional Facility have selflessly put their health on the line to do their jobs, protect our community, and return home to their loved ones. And how are they being repaid? With surprise of a pending closure just weeks before the holiday season. It's not right, and all of us here today are committed to developing a better path forward. And I think it's important to remember, too, that the proposed closure will hurt both our prison workforce and those that are incarcerated, who will likely be sent to more crowded facilities while the COVID-19 pandemic continues to pose a threat. It just doesn't make any sense. Earlier this year, there was talk that any facility slated for closure could be converted for other purposes, substance abuse treatment centers or the like. But based on the facilities that were slated for closure, that seems just like more lip service from the politicians in Albany. And I don't know about anybody here with me today, but I haven't heard about anybody being trained to work in any of these new proposed facilities at all. That would have been a good plan. So it doesn't make sense. And I also look at this too from another point of view. Being a single mom for a portion of my life, I can't even imagine of having to move or even travel just a couple hours difference while I have a child in school. It's just, a lot of this is just absolutely awful. And once again, it's our neighbors who are left scrambling, our neighbors who have to bear the economic burden of this closure, and our neighbors who will have to wonder what will become of another massive state abandoned property. And as Marcus had mentioned, you know, the state doesn't have a good track record with both the Beacon facility and it took many, many years with even the Hudson River Psychiatric Center. And let me be clear, this announcement came as a complete and total shock. There was absolutely no communication in advance from the state. In fact, I didn't get a letter from docs confirming the news until hours after the news blogs were already publicly spreading the word. What a slap in the face to the hardworking men and women who show up here every single day to do their best to ensure public safety. Our new governor promised to take a different approach from her predecessor. She promised to govern by listening, and I was hopeful that we would be similar in that regard. But instead, Albany continues its tradition of governing by arbitrary standards and metrics with no communication with the people who actually have skin in the game in the communities that are impacted. No understanding of our neighbors beyond the numbers represented on spreadsheets. It is not right, and I urge Governor Hochul to fulfill her promise, slow down the process, open a meaningful dialogue, and reconsider the decision to close Downstate Correctional Facility. Thank you.
Assemblyman Kieran Lawler.
Good afternoon. The closure of Downstate and the other prisons that were announced to be closed earlier this month aren't being closed for efficiency reasons. They're not being closed to save taxpayer dollars. If that were the case, they would have brought in all the stakeholders. They would have brought in the corrections officers. They would have brought in the other employees and the others who have a stake in this, the communities that have a stake in this. And they would have brought those stakeholders into a room, and we would have figured this out over a period of time, and we would have come up with the best possible solution. This is New York State government. New York State government doesn't do too many things quickly and decisively. But this was done quickly, and this was done decisively, without any stakeholders being told. And I think it was done because it's the triumph of politics and the triumph of ideology over common sense and over public safety. I've seen in 7.5 years or 8.5 years in the Assembly there is an ideology and there's a political view that the system is wrong and the people who are in correctional facilities are not wrong. And that view has manifested itself with the behavior and the decisions of the parole board. I've seen domestic terrorist release. We've seen dozens of cop killers paroled here in New York State. On the other end of the criminal justice spectrum, at the law enforcement police officer end, at the court end, we see bail reform. We see discovery reform. And we have this ideology that has put aside public safety and put aside common sense. And what they've said is, we care about the politics of this. Shutting prisons is good politics for the powers that be in Albany right now. And the communities be damned and public safeties be damned. And that's what's going on here. Not efficiency, not standing up for the taxpayers, nothing other than politics. And I'll even say this, it's election year politics. There is an election coming up in less than a year. The governor who made this decision is a candidate for election to win the governorship in her own right. And that's also to play here. And this community, the corrections officers, the employees, and those who wish to be safe in our communities are the victims of that political and ideological decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Our members are frustrated. They're frustrated because we receive nothing but contradictions from both the department and the governor's office. We're told that, we want to get inmates closer to their families in the city. They passed legislation that orders such. Here we have a facility that houses 1,300 inmates that can be within an hour of New York City. These inmates will now be sent up north, out west, further from their families. We have 600 staff members. Docs will be quick to say, "Hey, listen, we're not gonna see any layoffs." You're right. But we'll see resignations. We'll see retirements. We'll see people that are displaced so far away from home that their families will disconnect. It is infuriating that the department continues to give us these 90-day notifications for families to relocate, to uproot their kids. These aren't just corrections officers. These are T-ball coaches. These are members of the community, mothers, fathers, school teachers, bus drivers. They wear many hats. They make the facilities run, but they also keep the communities afloat. And to receive this yearly slap in the face right around the holidays, it's disingenuous. I would call on the governor here to explain the disconnect, because when we hear facilities are going to be repurposed, that she wants an alternative to basic confinement. But then in the next breath, we have a department that shuts down a drug treatment facility. It shuts down a facility that's in the middle of a $50 million project to increase programming. Our members don't understand. There's no continuity in what's being said and what's being done. I would urge the public to ask the $142 million, ask of the $142 million that is supposedly being saved, reinvest that into the remaining facilities. The problem is all the money that's touted. First off, as a taxpayer, I've never seen a reduction in my taxes despite all these prison closures. And I can tell you as an officer, I've never seen my facilities get any safer. None of those savings are realized within the department. Reinvest in your remaining staff. Reinvest in your remaining facilities. Do what you can to keep our guys safe, because right now our membership does not have confidence in the department or the governor to keep us safe. I'm open for any questions.
Are you here today to announce any kind of action or just voice concerns?
No, we're here to voice concerns. We're here to voice concerns, voice frustrations. Nothing has been done with all the savings that the so-called savings that has been incurred from these prison closures. We need a reinvestment in the facilities. We need to do something to make the facilities safer for not just the officers, but for the inmates. We've seen a 50% reduction in the inmate population, but a 100% increase in both inmate on staff violence and inmate on inmate violence. This has to be addressed, and the department has failed to address this for over a decade.
So what are you doing about it?
Currently, we have a federal lawsuit pushing back against the HALT legislation that was passed in the last session. We are actively asking all legislatures to consider a secure vendor program that will help the reduction of contraband, both dangerous weapons and dangerous narcotics that flow in and out of the facility. These are war cries that we've been asking for help from the department for years. We continuously get the lip service. We're working on it. Something's coming down the pike. Don't worry, it's happening. But it's not happening. The assaults continue. There was a staff assault at Downstate last night that sent officers to the hospital. This doesn't stop. Nothing gets better. No one does anything but provide lip service. And we're tired of it.
So are you taking any kind of legal action or any kind of filing with the state, formal letters?
We're willing to.
supporting the closures?
We're willing to do everything we can, everything within our power, to slow the closures, to have the legislature reconsider what they're pushing through. We have a session coming up in January, and quite honestly, every time the legislature's in session, our members are holding their breath because they're not sure what's going to come out the other side, what's going to put them in harm's way.
So are you here to warn people? Chris,
Go ahead.
I don't think it's your questions are fine. Certainly, it's certainly not the responsibility of the people who work behind those walls to try to explain to state legislators why their lives are at risk. And at the end of the day, what we ought to be doing and will encourage residents all across this region. You don't have to drive much further than 2 or 3 miles down the road to see what happens when the state of New York abandons a correctional facility. So pick up the phone, get on the computer, and email your state legislator, call your state legislator. Karen's here, Sue's here. Democrats are in the majority in both houses of the state legislature. They can decide to stop this. And by the way, under Governor Spitzer, despite his desire to close those facilities, it was Democrats in the state assembly working with Republicans agreeing that you would not announce these midnight deal closures and abandon facilities without redevelopment plans or consideration of the fiscal impact, the financial impact of closure. So they have a responsibility as state legislators to the people who pay their bills, who pay their salaries. And so pick up the phone, call your state legislator, ask the Democrat senator, ask the Democrat assembly member, ask the person who represents you, ask your member of Congress why it's okay for the state of New York to ignore the law that they are required to adhere to. Why is it okay to simply make an announcement without any coordination, any collaboration, and no plan? And what is going to happen with not only the building once abandoned, but more importantly, what happens to the families, what happens to the inmates, and what happens to the services? And if there is no answer today, then there was never any intention to be honest about this. That's what residents ought to do.
Unless there's something further, that will conclude the press conference.
Has the union had any conversations with Democratic lawmakers?
We have continuous conversations with Democratic lawmakers. They fall on deaf ears.
So you're hoping that their constituents?
We're hoping the constituents, the members of the community right here in Dutchess County, realize that there's going to be repercussions for closing a facility. They're not closing the facility because we're becoming a better society. We're not a safer society. The individuals behind the fence are the same individuals that are going to be behind you in the grocery store. And if you want a rehabilitated individual, closing facilities and stockpiling inmates in the remaining is not the way to get it done.
Last thing, and then just one more thing. Do you believe that prisons need to consolidate in New York State at all?
No, I believe prisons need to be repurposed. I believe they need, instead of closing prisons, space them out, increase programming, cut the capacities so that the incarcerated individuals will have opportunities to rehabilitate. But closing jails and stockpiling them on top of each other, it's bad for them. It's bad for the officers working in the facilities. It makes it more dangerous for everyone.